I mean, if there's only really one person that's rebelling at this point, and that is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was like TEMU MAGA. That was their focus. He's like, all right, I don't want to become weak to them and you know, bending the knee to this.
J.D. Vance would benefit if Trump has an eye toward 2028.
I think a Vance-Rubio ticket would kind of help balance the party a little bit.
Tonight, MAGA world at war. There's tensions in the movement that made Donald Trump erupt on multiple fronts. Because something seismic is happening inside MAGA. Israel, Epstein, and the price of eggs spark rows, rifts, and retribution. Take the very public divorce between President Trump and his one-time super fangirl, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Trump branded her Marjorie Traitor Greene after days of potshots from her across the liberal media. And she didn't hold back. Have a look at this.
I was called a traitor by a man that I fought for 6 years for. And I gave him my loyalty for free. I won my first election without his endorsement, beating 8 men in a primary. And I've never owed him anything, but I fought for him for the policies and for America first.
Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene is pitching herself as the new leader of the America First wing, but she's far from the only person to be demanding that President Trump refocuses on domestic issues. But as that fight rumbles on, another fault line opens. A bill to publish the full Epstein files is hurtling towards the president's desk tonight after senators unanimously agreed to pass the transparency demand. Meanwhile, and as ever, some of the biggest MAGA influencers are spending their week once again bickering online about Israel. Now, with next year's midterms looming on the horizon, the White House has spent the week trying to talk about affordability and the economy. But tonight, we ask, is MAGA going to blow this? Joining me in the studio is Alex Sawyer, the Washington Times editor-at-large, great title, if I say so myself, and the Washington Examiner's Jim Ansell. Guys, stay there. We're going to come to you in a moment. I think, down the line from New York, we've got Fox News contributor Joe Concha. Good evening, Joe. It looks to me like, I mean, they control the Senate, they control the House, they control the vibes. The Democrats are still in chaos, still reeling from 2024's defeat. And just at that moment, it looks like the coalition that made Donald Trump, put him in the White House twice, nearly 3 times, is tearing itself apart tonight.
Well, perhaps. I mean, if there's only really one person that's rebelling at this point, and that is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is like TEMU MAGA. I don't know, what TEMU is, but
I think we got you.
Okay, like a cheap version of it. So all I know is that Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's gotten on a lot of liberal networks here in the United States, CNN, MSNBC. She's getting glowing profiles from the press that used to hate her, and now suddenly she is adored. So if I saw a big movement against Donald Trump among the real ranks within the Republican Party, I'd say, yeah, there's a big problem here. But at this point, the Epstein files, I think when these things are released, and that will happen soon, and we see that Donald Trump is not in them, and I'm pretty sure of that because I'm certain that the first 3 times that Donald Trump ran for president, it would have been weaponized against him if there was any evidence of any wrongdoing. So once this thing blows over, then Marjorie Taylor Greene will be off the front pages, off cable news, and we'll head towards 2026 where, you brought it up before, affordability is what's going to decide that election, not the Epstein files from November of 2025.
What is she up to, though? Because after the couple of weeks ago, the result in New York, the result in Virginia, the result in New Jersey, yes, these were blue states, but it wasn't a great night for the Republicans. There was messages out of the White House from J.D. Vance saying, we need to start focusing more on the home front. A lot of sort of movement figures have popped their head above the parapet to say, hang on, this direction is not where we need to be going. Too much focus on foreign affairs. Is Marjorie Taylor Greene a sort of symptom of that, or is she a sort of canary in the coal mine for a wider sort of testing of the water and a wider sort of rebellion against the man that keeps this whole thing together?
Well, I think that she wants to run for president in 2028. She's trying to create her own MAGA wing.
I think we get some popcorn going there.
Yeah, wouldn't that be interesting? But she would be like an Eric Swalwell, where she'll somehow poll below 1% and be in the race for a long time and say a lot of provocative things. In the end, she wants to own the MAGA movement now. The MAGA movement without Donald Trump is like The Sopranos without Tony Soprano. It simply does not exist. So I think this is all for attention. It's all for clicks and views. And maybe one day she could be a co-host on The View, but I don't think this is a serious person with really serious aspirations.
Yeah, it's remarkable how quickly the liberal media and the old networks get people on when they're willing to slag off Donald Trump rather than anything else. Beyond Marjorie Taylor Greene, though, there has been some tensions in the wider conservative world. This has been rumbling on for 3 or 4 weeks now. This Tucker Carlson row over whether he should be platforming, Nick Fuentes, the anti-Semitic sort of pint-sized what is he, a blogger? No, what is he? Sort of podcaster, YouTuber. Provocateur. There is a sort of ongoing split about how close this administration should be to Israel. It does feel like the president doesn't have the sort of iron grip that he once had on the movement, and it is starting to perhaps look towards a post-Trump world.
Well, that world's coming sooner than we think, I guess, because remember, presidential campaigns start 2 years before the actual election. So right after the midterms, we'll be talking about J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio probably being the Republican ticket, and then 25 Democrats running on the other side, vying for that side. So, yeah, I think that, again, we're still 1 year out from the midterms. So many things can determine what happened there. And in the end, if Donald Trump's tariff bet pays off and we actually start to see prices come down, people feel it, interest rates come down, stock market continued to do well, not so much this week, but it came back a little bit today. I think that's what ultimately decides this election, and not all these rumblings, because Democrats have a civil war on their own front, clearly, with Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer particularly being targeted to be ousted, and new leadership being put in after losing that shutdown. That was a pretty big deal as well. So both parties have problems right now, no question.
It does strike me that it's slightly baffling, certainly to me, and I imagine to millions of American voters, that they took basically a month off of Congress, and they've come back and argued about a dead paedophile, and the Democrats have ended up shooting themselves in the foot on this one. You've got one congresswoman literally texting Jeffrey Epstein live from a committee hearing. You've got Hakeem Jeffries begging the guy for money after he'd been exposed. I mean, it's a sort of curse on all their houses, really. The Democrats are desperate to make this about Donald Trump, but it's ended up making them all look a little bit ridiculous, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Larry Summers, for example, the former Treasury Secretary to Obama, just retired, or at least resigned at Harvard. You mentioned Stacey Plaskett, it's not so much she was texting Epstein, 20 years ago. This was after, he was indicted for sex trafficking. And then this is the guy that you're looking for cliff notes from. That's a bad look. And Hakeem Jeffries obviously taking money from as well. Not a good look as well. The only person where I haven't seen any evidence that, profited or made money off of Jeffrey Epstein is Donald Trump, the guy who threw Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago 10 years ago once all these allegations came to light. So I have a feeling this is going to have a boomerang effect on Democrats, because they are really hyping this so much with innuendo that when it doesn't come through, just like the Russia hoax, this is something that are going to play a price for politically.
I mean, do you think it was that tactical in terms of Donald Trump's shift towards saying, actually, you know what, publish and be damned, get it all out? I mean, that was his original position, and then he changed his track over the course of the last months. He's now back to where he was on the campaign trail, saying, get it all out. Did he have a look at that and think, this is embarrassing Democrats more, or did he just realise he was going to lose the vote?
I think in the end that he just found it. He was objecting to it at first because he didn't want to give Democrats a win, because that was their focus. He's like, all right, I don't want to say I'm weak to them and bending the knee to this, because I have bigger fish to fry here as far as all the problems that I'm trying to fix in this country as a result of everything I inherited from Joe Biden. I think he saw it as an annoyance and a distraction, and then just said, all right, you know what, just get this off the table so we can move on to bigger things. That's where he seems to have landed on this. It could have been handled better, I'll say that. Clearing
the barnacles off the boat, as we call it, back in England. Joe Concha in New York, Fox News contributor. Always a pleasure to see you, and always so succinctly put there. Thanks for joining us tonight. Jim, Alex, welcome to Harry Cole Saves the West. I mean, it's the point there that Joe was making. This all could have been handled a lot better, right, Alex? I mean, it seems that ever since really the Mandami result in New York, the sort of the quite comprehensive thumping in Virginia, the worse than expected result in New Jersey, there has been a bit of a wobble in the White House, and actually their attempts to try and get the narrative back to groceries and cost of living and affordability and, you know, the potential checks from tariff bonuses. It's all being slightly drowned out by sort of things that are out of their control now.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a different take.
Excellent, that's what we like.
Well, my take is that Democrats, the polling started to show during the shutdown that blame was shifting. There was a YouGov analysis, I think, early November that showed, you know, the blame was on Republicans, and then it started to decrease by 4 points, and all of a sudden they came around, and they had to start, you know, don't look here, let's not talk about the shutdown, let's not talk about that. Let's look towards what worked before, Epstein files. That was something that did divide the base, that whole rollout. I think you were talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene. She seized that previously when there was going to be disclosure of the files, and then wait a second, Pam Bondi said something, no, that I don't have the files.
The files were sitting
exactly.
on the list, the client list was sitting on their desk.
And so I think that was something the Democrats were seizing on as a distraction from the failed shutdown maneuver that, you know, did not work out for them. And that's where this is coming from. And I think President Trump is just saying, enough is enough. We're not going to give it to them. Let's get it all out there.
Jim, if it was a plan for the Democrats, a cunning ruse to try and seize the agenda and seize the narrative, it's blown up in their face, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know quite how cunning it was. Initially, this was the first thing they've ever done that seemed to split Trump's coalition at all, right? But they've done some other things in the past that have worked, but this is the first thing that really resonated with some subset of the president's supporters. And so the Epstein files seemed like something they could seize on, especially since some of people in Trump's orbit, including the Attorney General and the FBI Director, appeared to really overpromise on what was going to get released. And there's still a lot of
the influencers as well, dragging them in with these, you know, these binders and boxes that was
overpromise, underdeliver, I think, is exactly what you were getting at.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, you know, another problem is that there's going to be a certain number of people who are really invested in this who are ultimately going to be unappeasable because they've already predetermined what is going to be in the Epstein files. And if they don't see those things, they are going to say that those were hidden in the redactions of whatever redactions exist, or were somehow not released as they were supposed to be.
And this goes on and on.
So if there's no smoking gun about Trump or Clinton or Israel, some of these people can't be placated.
They're still arguing about the JFK files. They were released, and they said, "Wow, well, there's still more." Alex, let's try this theory. I think ever since the horrific death of Charlie Kirk, there has been a sort of vacuum in the wider sort of, not leave aside the politicians, but the big faces, the Tucker Carlsons, the Jack Posobics, the Turning Point Brigade, the Heritage massive row. That horrific incident has actually really shattered what, you know, some unity within the MAGA world, within the right, within the wider Republican movement, that hasn't really, you know, recovered from that. Is that fair?
I think you're right. I think that's a fair analysis. I think part of that is because Charlie Kirk, I think it would be fair to say, and the names that you just listed, was probably the closest to the Trump administration, to the Trump family.
He was there helping pick cabinets.
Yes, and no one else seems to be that close, whether it's to the president himself, to one of his sons or family members, or J.D. Vance, for example, the vice president. So I think until there's a relationship like that, you are going to continue to have a vacuum.
It felt like Charlie Kirk was almost a bulwark against some of the, you know, kind of crazier fringes of the right. You know, his former friend, I suppose we call her now, his friend Candace Owen is pumping out some horrific sort of conspiracy theories that don't really seem to survive the point of contact. Turning Point tried to initially ignore all that, but now actually are addressing it one by one. You got Tucker playing some sort of strange game, which I think seems to me more about Israel than anything else, sort of normalising people like Nick Fuentes, who were, you know, were on the very fringes of the movement until a matter of weeks ago. Is this about wrestling control not necessarily about the midterms, but about picking the next Donald Trump, the next leader?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump didn't just hand out the Trump 2028 ball caps to troll, although I think that was a pretty
it worked pretty well.
Reason.
I have one.
But he also wanted to stave off when he was going to become a lame duck, which, you know, part of the problem is this is an unconventional second term. It's a non-consecutive second term. So Trump is already focused on legacy stuff, isn't running again. But for the movement and for the party to remain unified, he kind of does have to act as if he's running for re-election. Certainly, J.D. Vance would benefit if Trump has an eye toward 2028. The thing about Charlie Kirk is, Charlie Kirk was a rare MAGA leader who was, by temperament and nature, a team player and unifying. He wanted to bring people together. And rightly or wrongly, a lot of the other personality types that are involved and who are major MAGA influencers are sort of not that way by temperament, by inclination.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you got your Steve Bannon saying he's going to, potentially eyeing a run for president. I mean, J.D. Vance has said he will have a talk. He'll have that discussion after.
I think he's eyeing it.
Yeah, of course
when he was down at the Turning Point USA event, I think it was in Mississippi, and they started chanting 48. I don't know if you noticed there was a pause. He totally soaked that in.
Smirk.
You could see it.
Yeah.
I will say I worked for Steve Bannon in the past. I worked at Breitbart when he was there before he went into the Trump administration in 2017, I think it was, the first Trump administration. And I loved working for him. One of the best bosses I've had. Despite everything you read in the media, he's amazing. So I just have to put that out there.
We'll come back to Vance in a moment, but on the Bannon point, presumably he doesn't actually think he's going to be the president, but he will be running to keep the MAGA world pure, right?
I think he
get on the debate stage.
He tries to hold people to account, to your point. And then also you brought up the Trump 2028 hats. I was just actually in Florida at an event where Laura Trump was speaking. It was a pro-life event, Action for Life, and she did address the Trump 2028 hat, and she said, we love it. We just haven't said which Trump.
Exactly,
so maybe that's a little tease. I don't know.
It strikes me that it's JD and Rubio's ticket to lose, right? Yes, obviously it's a long way out. There's some suggestion that Vance has been keeping somewhat of a low profile of the last couple of weeks. Hasn't quite, he's walked a very delicate line on the Tucker Carlson stuff. He's obviously he's on the record as saying that Tucker is his friend. He employs Tucker's son. There's a suggestion that maybe, just maybe, he's starting to put a little bit of distance between him and the guy down the end of the corridor. Is that fair?
I mean, I'm interested to get your take. One of the things I'll weigh in on real quick is just, I know CPAC, that's always been big. They've never let Nick Fuentes in. There's actually been security issues to ensure that he's not there. Yeah. And, maybe there's something to do with some donors, money that's saying enough is enough. We don't need this mess.
Yeah. J.D. Vance putting a bit of distance there, putting a bit of ankle to the movement.
Well, this is the only challenge I think that Vance really faces, at least within the Republican Party, is that anybody who's a sitting vice president, while it gives you a leg up over everybody else, you also become responsible for whatever the administration does. And President Trump is not a guy who's going to cede the spotlight as willingly as. Well, Joe Biden didn't really do it particularly willingly, but he certainly, once they shuffled him off the stage, was gone. Yeah. Whereas Donald Trump is not a man who goes away lightly. He had already had a split with his previous vice president, so he's going to be looking to see whether Vance stays loyal as the spotlight shifts more toward him.
While the younger generation try to pull him in maybe an even more America First isolation.
And Vance has to hold off anybody like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Steve Bannon who is going to try to run as the purer than thou alternative.
What about from the other side, though? What about Marco Rubio? Because on paper, he's the more experienced politician. He's not the vice president, but he was a senator long before J.D. Vance was. He has had a longer, more distinguished career than J.D. Vance. Surely he'd be like saying, hang on, it's my go. Wait.
And honestly, I think a Vance-Rubio ticket would kind of help balance the party a little bit. There's a lot of people in the party that remember Rubio as more of the establishment when he was in the Senate.
Right.
And so, when you have Vance more of the MAGA wing, Rubio more of the establishment, I think that they seem to work really well together, and they could do so come 2028.
So you got Nick Fuentes threatening to flood every single campaign stop from Iowa to New Hampshire to South Carolina when Vance and co turn up with 10,000 groypers to if he gives 1 inch on Israel. I think the threat was this. I'm old enough to remember when this kid was saying vote for Kamala Harris. Does he actually have the influence that he has? He's got a very loyal, slightly bonkers, very young, mostly male online following, but does it actually materialize in the ballot box?
The thing is, having a successful podcast and being able to govern and campaign successfully are two completely different things. And you can simply be provocative. People can hate watch you, hate listen to you. They're not going to hate vote for you,
Yeah.
right? So you can be. We also don't know how much of his audience is international, because there's a big European far right that might be attracted to this. A lot of them speak English. Are there 10,000 Groypers in the country? I think that's the whole country, much less in every congressional district in Iowa or wherever. I think that's a big question. How influential are the influencers? Trump 2024 bet, I think correctly, that internet can be real life, and they played that medium very well.
And spoke to the audiences that wouldn't necessarily receive his messages.
The Biden people ignored their online.
Hey, but they have Beyonce though, so it was fine.
they have other outlets. Yes.
We're going to go to a break in a second, but how important is it that kind of Trump remains on the ticket in some way? Obviously, I'm not talking about Donald or Eric or Barron one day, perhaps, but what I think those elections showed last month, was it earlier this month? Earlier this month, was actually when Trump isn't on the ticket, the Republican organization on the ground, just doesn't get the same number of votes out. Yeah,
so two things. I interviewed a senator recently, and he said that the support for President Trump on Capitol Hill has never been stronger, and that its leadership under Thune, as well as over in the House Johnson, that they communicate. It wasn't like that before. Right. So you saw that shift when McConnell left as leader. It seems like that his influence on the Hill is getting things done. There's more unity. Does that go out to, for the election? What happens there? You talked about New York, New Jersey, Virginia. I think it would have been huge if Republicans had any shot there. Those were blue territories. In Virginia, I think it is, the past 50 years, there's only been one time a governor has been elected from the same party as the president.
Virginia
so, I think it would have been surprising had Republicans done well in either of those states. We knew New York was gone.
Jim, if you were advising the White House now, how confident would you feel about 2026? I mean, the attempt to slightly put a thumb on the scales with the redistricting has hit some legal snags. This is existential, really, for this administration. We're not becoming lame duck, because it will be back into impeachment and endless inquiries and crypto investigations and the like if they don't win, right? So this is kind of must do or die.
It's hugely important. I wouldn't be super confident right now, but I would say there's still a long way to go. And I do think they are starting to pivot back to domestic issues, which is what they really need to do. Of course, if they don't win the midterm elections, domestic issues will be off the table for them entirely.